Today, we're diving into a really pioneering study from 1993. This is when modern science first took a serious, rigorous look at an ancient and powerful hallucinogenic brew from the heart of the Amazon. It was a huge deal, trying to apply science to something that was, until then, mostly just shrouded in myth and ritual.
So the substance we're talking about is called Hoasca, though you've probably heard it called by its more common name, Ayahuasca. And that name from the indigenous Quechua language is just incredibly powerful. It literally translates to vine of the souls. Just think about that for a second, vine of the souls. It gives you an immediate sense of its deep spiritual importance.
And look, this is nothing new. Ayahuasca has been used for centuries, possibly even for thousands of years, by native peoples in the Amazon. For them, it's considered a great medicine. It's totally central to their way of life. They use it for healing, for seeing into the future, and it's the absolute core of their religious ceremonies.
So this brings up a really fascinating question, and it's really the whole point of our explainer today. What actually happens to your mind when this powerful brew isn't just a one-off thing, but a regular sacred ritual, something you do twice a month, every single month, for more than 10 years straight?
Well, that's the exact question a team of scientists from all over the world set out to answer back in 1993. They packed their bags and traveled to Manaus, a city right in the middle of the Brazilian Amazon, to conduct a scientific investigation that was truly the first of its kind.
Now, what's really cool about this whole story is how this study even got started. The scientists didn't just show up unannounced. No, they were actually invited by the Uniao de Vegetal, or UDV. It's a church that legally uses ayahuasca as their main sacrament. The church leaders actually wanted an objective, scientific look at what they were doing, hoping it might give them some backup if things ever got politically tricky.
Okay, so to do this properly, the researchers knew they had to set up a controlled study. That means you need two groups to compare. You have your group of long-term ayahuasca users from the church, and then you have another group, a control group, to see how they measure up. So let's look at the first group. We've got 15 men, all of them dedicated members of the church for at least a decade. They were taking ayahuasca in these rituals twice a month, like clockwork. And here's the really crucial part. Their faith required them to completely abstain from alcohol and any other recreational drugs. That made them a uniquely clean group to study, scientifically speaking.
And then you have the control group, also 15 men from the exact same community. They had never used ayahuasca, and the researchers were super careful to match them with the first group based on age, ethnicity, whether they were married, even their level of education. This kind of careful matching is what lets you make a really strong scientific comparison.
So what were the scientists actually measuring? Well, they focused on three main things to get a complete picture. First, they did in-depth psychiatric interviews. Second, they used standard personality tests. And third, they ran a whole battery of neuropsychological tests to check on things like memory and thinking skills. And the results, well, let's just say they were not what most people at the time would have expected at all. The data they collected flew right in the face of the common idea that long-term use of any kind of hallucinogen had to be damaging. All right, so let's break down what they actually found. First on the list, psychiatric health. Using a really structured diagnostic interview, the researchers took a deep look at the past and present mental health of everyone involved. And this right here is the first jaw-dropping finding. A whole bunch of the Ayahuasca users had a history of some pretty serious problems before they joined the church. We're talking alcohol abuse, major depression, serious anxiety. But at the time of the study, every single one of those issues was gone. There was zero current psychiatric diagnoses in the entire user group. Meanwhile, the control group actually had 2 active cases.
Okay, so their mental health seemed to have taken a massive turn for the better. But what about their fundamental personality? For that, the researchers used something called the Tridimensional Personality Questionnaire.
What's so interesting here is the pattern that emerged. The Ayahuasca users scored way lower on 2 key personality traits. The first one is novelty seeking, which basically means they were less impulsive and more reflective, orderly, and stoic. The second was harm avoidance, which means they were more confident, relaxed, and optimistic, instead of being anxious and fearful. These are traits we often connect with emotional maturity. But this is the big one, right? This is the question that always comes up. For decades, the assumption was that using psychedelics long-term would fry your brain, leading to cognitive decline or burnout. So what did the test actually show after more than 10 years of regular use? This might have been the most stunning result of the entire study. Far from finding any kind of damage, the ayahuasca users actually performed significantly better than the controls on some key cognitive tests.
So what does that mean in practice?
Well, on a standard test of verbal learning, the ayahuasca group was able to remember significantly more words than the control group after 5 tries. The researchers found zero evidence of any kind of cognitive problems. If anything, the data hinted at some kind of enhanced function. It was wild.
But this study wasn't all about numbers on a chart. To really get the full picture, the scientists sat down and did these incredibly in-depth life story interviews. And these stories, they just add such a powerful human layer to all the data.
So many of the men talked about how their lives were just completely spiraling out of control before they found the church. They described alcoholism, violence, just the feeling of being on a path to total self-destruction. As this one person put it, he saw his life ending in one of only 3 places: a hospital, a prison, or a cemetery.
And they said their first few experiences with ayahuasca were often absolutely terrifying, but ultimately completely transformative. They'd have these powerful visions that just forced them to look at where their lives were headed. And in these visions, they'd often meet the founder of the church, Maestre Gabriel, who would, as this quote says, show them how to put themselves back together again.
And this is such a critical point. The men themselves were crystal clear that it wasn't just some magic potion. They really stressed that these positive life changes were only possible because they were taking the ayahuasca inside the supportive, structured, and guided setting of the church rituals. They called the church a vessel that helped them navigate the whole experience safely.
So let's pull all of this together. What's the big takeaway from this amazing piece of work from 1993? Well, it paints a picture that is way more complex and way more fascinating than the simple black and white stories we usually hear about these things.
The authors of the study concluded that in this specific setting, long-term ayahuasca use was linked with the healing of serious psychiatric problems, showed absolutely no signs of hurting personality or thinking skills, and seems to have an overall positive, even therapeutic effect. They made it very clear, whatever this was, it was completely different from what we normally call drug abuse.
And yet this is what makes it such great science. The researchers ended their paper with this vital, incredibly honest question that people are still debating today. Did the ayahuasca and the church actually cause all these amazing changes, or is it possible that a certain type of person, someone who is already inclined to become more reflective and confident, is just the kind of person who's drawn to this path in the first place? Is it correlation or is it causation? It's a question this study couldn't answer, and it leaves us to wonder about the real mystery at the heart of it all.